We're live. Welcome. My name is Lorenz. This is our Creator Conversation series from Sutra.co. And today I'm excited to be talking to Tad Hargrave, who is a bit of a thought leader when it comes to ethical marketing. And welcome, Tad.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
What I really appreciate about you, Tad, is that from the few interactions I've had with you and the videos that I've watched of you online, I feel like you're like a real student of marketing, and I've learned so much from the things you've shared, and also just really been inspired by your journey with marketing. I think it's easy to take for granted the way that marketing is done with like high pressure tactics and scarcity and urgency.
Mm.
And it's been really enlightening for me to encounter people like you that are deeply versed in the art of marketing and yet find a completely different expression for that. So I'd love to just start there and just have you share a little bit about your journey with marketing.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's funny because when you say, it's good to come across me, people like me, I just think back to where I was at when I began 18, 19 years old and doing all this high pressure stuff. And I felt really trapped in it at a certain point. I could tell it didn't feel good. That was clear, but I didn't know what else to do. And if you only have one alternative, you have to rationalize it. It has to make sense. You have to, convince yourself that it's what really needs to be done, and it's really good for the other people anyways. And I just didn't know that there was another way. So I did. I worked for a leadership development company, and I did all the high pressure stuff: the Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, all this stuff, and it didn't work that well. I mean, the results I was getting were not great. Doing this kind of cold calling, but it also felt terrible. So it was the worst of both worlds.
Mm.
But I suppose it worked well enough. I was sort of scraping by, and the promise was always, well, if you just get better at these tools, if you just become more, the reason they're not working is you're not doing it hard enough. You're not persisting. It just takes time, and that's I don't think that was ever true, but that's always the pitch, is that it's this hopium. You get addicted to this hope. Well, it'll turn around if I just go to the next course, if I just learn the next iteration, if I just get more skillful at it, then it'll work. But in my experience, if these things work, they should work fairly quickly. You should notice results right away. So it's strange, whenever I hear people say that, I just think, oh my gosh, that would have I wish I could have heard that when I was 18, 19, because there was a point when I was in it where I just felt so disgusted with the whole thing, but I
Mm.
didn't know what else to do. Uh,
Mm.
and so I wish I could have come across somebody like me when I'd first started.
Mm.
Would have saved me a lot of pain.
Yeah, and I think you're really highlighting something pretty key, which is that it doesn't seem like there's a lot of alternatives. Even today, I mean, it's not like things have changed that much in the last 20 years. Um, so when we talk about an alternative, like what are we talking about?
Well, to me, there's a fundamental distinction, and I would agree with you. I wish this was more prevalent than it is, and I feel sort of out of touch with the marketing scene. I don't even know if there is just one marketing scene. There's the multi-level marketing scene. There's this kind of holistic practitioner, life coach marketing. There's so many different industries of marketing, and so I can't speak to all of them. But the fundamental thing that I realized looking back that felt bad about the kind of marketing I was doing, and that seems to be true across a lot of industries, is there's this hidden agenda to get the sale. And that's what underlies everything. Every tactic, every move, every strategy is ultimately designed to get people to say yes. And that you can dress that up a lot of different ways, including in a heart-based, conscious way. This is a ethical, spiritual marketing where the agenda is still to get them to buy. And in some ways that's worse, because then it's a weird extra level of gaslighting. You think, well, this should be beautiful, this should be uplifting, this should be it should feel good, but it doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
But then they get to say, aha, well, that's your set of limiting beliefs. The number of people I've seen go through these marketing courses that call themselves, heart-based and everything, but the tactics they're suggesting are fundamentally high pressure, and they have to be at some level, because it's about trying to get people to do something that may not be a fit for them, that they may not want to actually do. So you're going to have to use a bit of this strong arming and seduction and manipulation. And then when they express, this doesn't feel right, I don't know if I can do this, it's framed as, well, that's your limiting beliefs. You must not believe you're worthy, or you must not really believe in your product or service if you're not willing to do these unethical things. And I tell them, it's not that you have a limiting belief, it's that you have a conscience. And you can feel this is wrong. But that's a real hard place to be, where your conscience tells you it's wrong, but you don't see another way to do it. And, well, you got to pay the bills, and you got to feed the kids, and there's a mortgage. And so, these people have at least an approach, and some of it makes sense. So, I think that's a lot of why it feels bad. And when we talk about an alternative, to me, that's the basis of the alternative. It's, are you focused on the sale, or are you focused on the truth? And, the truth of, is this a fit or not? Because if that's where the focus is, the rest will largely work itself out. But if you're focused on the sale, it doesn't matter. You can take all the ethical tactics. I don't think there's any such thing as an ethical tactic or an ethical strategy. They're just ethical agendas. And to me, the only agenda at the end of the day that's ethical really is the truth. We're going to have this conversation. We're going to engage with the agenda that we get to the truth really quickly of if this is a fit or if it isn't. And then you can take any tactic. I mean, people have thrown well, what about this tactic? What about that tactic that they would consider to be unethical or manipulative? Putting people in a trance. Well, that's unethical. I don't know if it is. If it was really coming from a place of, by going into this trance state, you're going to help yourself figure out if this is a fit or not. And if that was the mutual agenda on both sides, maybe that would be a real beautiful thing. Using scarcity. Oh, but you can't use scarcity, that's unethical. Well, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but this is a scarce universe in terms of the material world. We've only got so much water, so much oil, so much and maybe there's more than we think or less than we think, but there is a finite amount that does run out at a certain point. So it's the same in marketing and business. Yeah, I'm doing a workshop in Toronto coming up here, and then Nelson and Calgary. Those rooms are all different sizes, but there's a limit to how many people I can fit in those rooms. And beyond that, unless I get another venue, it's full, it's sold out. So talking about the scarcity of things isn't an issue. I mean, the problem becomes that there actually is no scarcity. It's being used as only so many ebooks available. You know what? It's and there's no reason for scarcity, aside from it being used as a tool to create a kind of panic inside of people so that they buy. So yeah, when I say alternative, when I think about alternative, it's an alternative agenda, not an alternative set of tactics.
Yeah, and it could be such a subtle territory. I mean, it's definitely, I'll speak for myself, that it's a territory I'm always having to be, I guess, similar to the word you used, I think earlier, or at least I've read in your writing, about unlearning, and when we share our material, I mean, obviously, yes, our intention is to, say, sell our course, but
Sure.
I think the heart of it, what you're calling truth, is, how do we communicate in a way that makes it really clear for a person exactly what we're offering and whether or not it's a right fit for them? Because I have, as a human being, I have zero interest in taking someone's money if what I'm offering is not adding value to their life and it's not a good fit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because this is one of the, as soon as you say, but we don't want to focus on getting the sale, we want to focus on the truth, where people get stymied is, but I need sales. And I said, well, yeah, that's true. You do need sales. The critical distinction that needs to be made is you need people to buy, but you don't need this person to buy. That's where it gets sticky. Uh,
Mm.
at the first level, at least, is it's in the particular. You're a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman, and you show up. You're just taught to get, not, you just don't need customers. You need these people you're talking to right now to buy, and all the tactics come on to get them to buy, whether or not it's a fit. And then if you extrapolate that online, with sales letters, if your intention is to get every single person who's reading to buy, that's a problem, because you're going to change the way you write it. You'll leave
Mm.
out things that might filter people out. You're going to make it as seductive as possible. It's going to just promise the world. It's going to promise everything and ask nothing, um, and therefore ultimately disappoint almost everybody. So, do we need sales? Yes. Do we need people to buy? Obviously. But we don't need anyone particular to buy. So then the whole game of marketing becomes getting really clear. Who is it that I can best help? Who are my people? Yeah, what is it I do? What is it I don't do? How do I do it? How don't I do it? All these kind of filtering questions, and making sure that is as clear as possible, because then, if you're writing from the agenda to buy, then the headline of a sales letter becomes basically a hook. All you're trying to do is get them to read the next thing. Yeah, and the subheadline, you're just trying to get them to read the next thing. And you're trying to get every single person who's reading it to the bottom of the sales letter with hook after hook after hook, sort of teasing after teasing after, you know, huge result promised, amazing guarantee, so that everyone would buy. That's the goal. But if you're coming from this filtering place, the headline serves a very different function. And the purpose of the headline is to eliminate almost everybody. The purpose of the headline is just to,
Mm.
what's the subheadline for? Eliminate most of the rest. And then
Mm.
what's that first chunk of text for? God, almost nobody left standing. So that by the end of the sales letter, the only people who are still reading it are people who are a perfect fit. And
Mm.
you say, but Tad, there's so many, and you could probably study this scientifically, how many eyeballs, how many people actually make it down to the bottom of the page. And you could say, Tad, well, we've proven you're wrong. It was an interesting theory. We like your ethics. You're a good guy. The hippie thing, it's a good shtick. But when we did the test with our approach of this seduction-based marketing, we got 95% of the people to the bottom of the sales letter, and 80% clicked, and you only got 5% of the people to the bottom of the sales letter, 1% or 2% clicked. Great. But the people who actually bought from me, number one, didn't ask for a refund immediately after buying, which most of your people did. Two, they were a perfect fit, so they got great results. They told everybody, versus your people who, even the ones who didn't ask for a refund, weren't a perfect fit, didn't get great results. So now you've got kind of tepid word of mouth in the marketplace. I mean, I understand the metrics they're saying, and by those metrics, they're winning. They're better than me. But if the goal is, I suppose this is one of the questions people have to ask is, you know, do you want to be in business long term or not? Is this a hobby or is this a business? Is this something you want to do for 2 years? Because if it's just a couple of years, I mean, knock yourself out. There's probably different strategies to use. But if you want to be doing this for a decade or 20 or 30 years, if you want to build this up as something long term, the only thing that will do that in the long term is reputation.
Mhm.
In the long term, your reputation will make or break you. And that reputation is fundamentally from the results that you get people. People talk about the experiences they have. And so if you're not filtering really carefully and you're just working with everybody, at best, your reputation will be so-so, because you hit some home runs and then you strike out, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. But at worst, you've got a bad reputation, because it's kind of all over the place. So and if you're really manipulating and pushing, likely you're going to be getting more and more clients who are just not a fit, and
Mhm.
therefore you won't get good results. So I think that's just a fundamental question people need to ask as they begin: is this kind of what I'm doing to pass the time right now, or do I see myself doing this long term? Then the ethics are the whole thing.
Mhm.
Whereas in the short term, I mean, if I just want to fill a workshop tomorrow, I don't need ethics. I just want to get people in the room. There's all sorts of tactics that can do that, but they won't work in the long term. Those tactics can get people to buy, but they won't get people to be loyal at the end of the day.
Hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate that note about the way you write a letter. The feedback I get, from people, like I write my newsletters pretty regularly, and then
Mm,
some of the people on our team are like, "Lorenz, it's too long. Nobody reads
mm,
long emails." And I'm like, "But the people I'm speaking to do, and they
right.
appreciate the stories I share, and it's not for everybody. For the people who want the like 2 paragraph email, but like I know that the people that consistently go to me and be like, "Wow, Lorenz, like your email really touched me."
Yeah.
Like those are the people I want to attract, and that's who I'm writing for. And so sometimes like I have to kind of reconcile that with myself. Like, yeah, it's a long email, but I'm like you said, I don't think about it this way, but like yeah, I'm filtering for those people.
Yeah. Amen. And of course, we always get better at our craft. We'll get better at writing the emails. We'll become better writers over time. And so, we might look back in 20 years at some of the emails we say, oh my God, that was no good. But we get better at it. But at the end of the day, well, I mean, I suppose there are these two dynamics that we always have to balance in business, two archetypes at work. One is the artist and one is the entrepreneur.
Mm,
And the artist would want to just self express and just put, I've got the muse has struck and I just have to share this with the world. And so that might be a long, winding email. But the focus of writing it is I'm just expressing myself. And there's no real thought about how it's landing. I'm just like, does this look good to me? Is this interesting to me?
mm,
I'm putting it out. And that's where some of the best art in the world comes from. They're not pandering. They're not trying to do something commercial. They're not trying to please anybody. They're trying to please themselves. And that's where some of the best art comes from. I work with a woman, Kalita. She has a business, Showgirl Awakening, and works with women around creating burlesque shows. And that's from what I understand, one of her big teachings for them is don't go on stage to please the audience. Please yourself.
mm,
And the audience will then be delighted. And I've done improv comedy for years. And yes, if the people on stage are genuinely having fun, the audience is going to have more fun versus if you're trying to get the approval of the audience. So that's one of the dynamics. And then the other is this entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur is always thinking, well, what's commercial? What will sell? What's the unmet need? And therefore the whole focus is outside. The whole focus is what's the response. But we do need both, because even if you're doing this burlesque show and you're trying to please yourself, you do have to be aware of how the audience is responding still to adapt. If you're doing an improv comedy show, I mean, yeah, you can go on some zany thing, but some part of you has to be able to reel it in if you realize you're losing the audience.
mhm,
And the same with marketing. We have a certain thing we do, and then we have to always, yeah, balance between those. Is this working? And are there enough people? Are there enough people who like to read my long emails? Because we may realize, oh, there aren't, or there are. And of course, the entrepreneur would probably never take that chance. The entrepreneur likes the more guaranteed, assured thing. But that means then the entrepreneur never comes up with something extraordinary. It's
mm,
usually a copy. It's a knockoff. The entrepreneur would say, well, what do other people do in their emails? They're usually very short, or so that's what I'll do too, because that's the model that's working. And the entrepreneur or the artist doesn't care about models. The artist is the one that creates the models for other people that everybody else eventually copies and tries to knock off. So yeah, it's an ongoing tension. But yeah, amen. When I do a workshop, as long as I know I did a good job, and I'm open to feedback, but sometimes people say, well, this wasn't for me. And it's like, well, that's true. Yeah, it's not that it's not good, it's that it wasn't for you. And then my responsibility as a marketer becomes, how do I make sure that people know this before they come?
mhm,
What do I
mhm,
do to make sure that that person would never have come? So if anyone ever asks us for a refund or, complains, what they're fundamentally saying is what I got was different than what I expected, which means something about our marketing gave them that impression,
mm,
or likely. So then we have to think about, okay, what could I have changed that they wouldn't have bought, they wouldn't have come? And that's to me respectful marketing.
Hmm.
That's really considerate marketing, where as quickly as possible in the process, those people hop off, so their time doesn't get wasted and our time doesn't get wasted. No, but the people who it is a fit for, they lean in more. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to this the truthfulness of an experience. Are you really in service of the human experience, the human beings that you're interacting with, and also something else that you're highlighting that really speaks to a big part of what we share. We call it prototyping, but the version of it is basically being in relationship to reality. So like whether
Mm,
you want to write long emails, great. Like put it out there, see how people respond, see what happens. Keep an eye on it, and kind of I think that's really this heart of this like intersection between your internal world, what you're calling the artist, and then the external
mm.
reality, like of how people respond, the entrepreneur, and finding that in being at that intersection in a very intentional way. Because and of course, if you're just like, yo, I'm straight up artist, that's good too. But I think for a lot of people, you need to pay the bills, and finding the truthful intersection of that feels good to you and adds value, and is in service to others, um, is really where where the economic aspect can come alive.
Well, it's like, well, if you want to just be an artist, that's great, but just know that what the fate of a lot of artists is. They're famous after they're dead. You know, it's it's sometimes as an artist, you'll hit a home run. I don't know if you've ever been to a fringe theater festival or something. There's all these plays and
Mm,
shows from all around the world. People come together, and people will, the ones who are, um, you see some people who are just such artists 100%, and so they take risks that no one else would take in a show, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. When they work, it's 5-star reviews. This is the most extraordinary uh, play I've ever seen. What a perform
mm.
it's people, the word of mouth is so incredible. I just saw the movie. I don't know if you've seen it, Everything Everywhere
Yeah.
All at Once.
Yeah.
So that's an artist who made
Mm.
that movie. That was not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur would never dream of a movie like that. If for everyone who hasn't seen it, go see it immediately. Uh, it's
It's
one of the most,
incredible. It's a work of art. It is. It's like
yeah,
it's mind
you
blowing.
and I'm sure people, you've tried to explain it to people, and then you just sort of
You
break it down.
can't. I mean, the way you can't explain a work of art, that really moves you. You can't quite explain the movie.
Because it also, it created in my mind, it's a whole other category. I've never seen anything like it, so I can't give them a category because
Mm.
it doesn't fit in any. So that's to me what an artist thing looks like. And then, Fast and Furious number 8, that's the entrepreneur. In fact, the first one was the entrepreneur. That probably it was. It's a franchise. We can just keep rolling with this. That's for the most part the entrepreneur. So yeah, it does take both. And if people say, I have seen people just so resistant, and even though they don't have my languaging, what they're telling you is me, no, I'm an artist. I do artist things. I do what I want. So, okay, but you don't have the right to blame the marketplace for not buying it.
Mm.
It's beautiful that you do that. And if you can pay, I mean, I don't care. Great. But if it's not commercially viable, if it's not going to work in the marketplace, that's something to look at. But similarly, people say, "No, I don't do this, creative stuff. I'm just an entrepreneur. I do what works." It's like, okay, uh, you're going to feel a certain soullessness, and that's what you're signing up for now, is a kind of emptiness, a lack of meaning, a lack of purpose, because all you're doing is looking outside and saying, "What are the niche opportunities here?" and jumping on them and jumping on every trend, and that's not going to feel authentic and soulful in any way over the long term. So of course we just have to, and it never gives you a break. That's the thing. That tension never stops. It's never over. The artist is constantly, with the fringe, they have to look at, okay, I had a show last year that killed 5 stars. Everybody loved it. I could bring it back, but I got this new thing I'm more excited about and I want to, and then you have to choose. Or, and how much do you adapt your show to pander? And it's not that it's bad to adapt it. It's just, it never stops. It never gives you a break. It'll always be there.
Mm. So what are your suggestions for, your average, say, solo solo business person, solo entrepreneur, solo artist. A lot of the people we work with are coaches, healers, consultants, like yoga teachers, kind of people basically a one person business. Um, what are your recommendations for a person like that who's looking to get started or build an audience, particularly online?
Yeah. Well, I can give the one piece of advice that will destroy everything, which is try to be everything to everybody. That's the end. I mean, just stick a fork in it. It's done. It's
Mm,
over. Put it out to pasture. That's not going to work out long term. That's the that's at the heart of most of the troubles I see is fundamentally no clarity around the niche, no clarity around what their role is in the marketplace, no clarity around what they want to be known for. I see that so much. That's the dominant problem. When people call me one on one to work with me, almost every single person, I'd say 95% of the people, oh, it's the niche thing.
mm,
So that's the very first thing is some clarity about, there's this six things you can get clear about. The old journalistic thing, it's the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how. And if I said, well, what do you do? And you can't give me a clear answer, where do you do it? When do you do it? For whom do you do it is a big one. How do you do it? Big one. If you can't answer those questions, and they're simple questions, but they're not easy to answer. It's the big mystery of this marketing stuff. The simplest stuff is the hardest to do. But if you don't have a clear answer to that, then nothing else matters. I could give you all the tactics in the world, and we could talk about hub marketing and partnering and all the joint ventures, and we could talk about Facebook ads and targeting and all, but it's useless. You're just going to waste money. Yeah, people go redesign their website and they don't have those questions answered, and it's a waste of money. I would
mm,
much rather see somebody with mediocre tactics and mediocre design, but real clarity around their niche than the opposite, because there's a lot of the opposite. So that's the most important thing. Who is this
mm,
for? Once you get clear about that, um, who it's for, and you got your point of view pretty clear, then the most important thing is this hub marketing piece. Um, which I wrote an ebook about. There's tons of free videos on YouTube. I've got a whole playlist on this. If you go to, I think it's marketingforhippies.com/steps. I think that's step 5 of the 5 steps. And basically, it's how do you partner with people? Instead of trying to run around finding people, how do you make it easy that they find you? Um, it's a better approach. But that's impossible if you don't have the niche. You can't do that. If you're trying to be everything to everybody, that means you're trying to reach everybody. And what are the hubs for everybody? Everywhere. It's and
mm.
then there you are with your marketing in a way that doesn't work like the movie. You're everything everywhere all at once. And that, while that has worked for this movie, that will fail for your business.
Mm, mm. And of course, the movie is definitely not for everybody. And the movie is extremely niche. So, yeah, I really appreciate what you're sharing. In our own experience, one of the biggest transformations in our business is we spent the first few years, people would always ask us, like, who is this for? Who is this for? And we kind of struggled with that question. And then there was a coach who asked us once, and she said, well, who are you inspired to serve?
Mm,
And when we reframed it around who are we really inspired to serve, and this kind of like this intersection of like our inner creator and the
yeah.
entrepreneur, that helped us really focus what we were building, who we were communicating to, why we were doing it. And even today, people tell us all the time, they say, um, or like there's a question of like, should we focus on organizations with the work that we do because organizations have more money, but like
Mm,
the people that we're inspired to serve are solo heart-centered creators. I mean, that's where we feel the most resonance. That's where,
mm,
and that really shapes the way that we pretty much approach everything. Like our language is not, or we have organizations who use our product, but our language isn't oriented towards them. So, it really creates a certain scaffolding around everything that we put out. So
yeah.
I'm curious, like, in this domain, like how does a person get clarity around these things?
Um, there's a bunch of again, the marketingforhippies.com/steps. I think step 2, it's all my stuff on niching, and there's really probably 100 or more free videos people can check out there on niching. So, and one of them is niching exercises. There's so many exercises, but the fundamental, I suppose, the architecture of the thing is you've just got to start with what's clear, because everybody knows something about their niche. People will say, "Oh, I don't know anything about my niche," but it's never true. If I sit them down, I say, "Well, what do you know?" "Oh, well, I like working with women more than men," or I like working with in middle age. And if you just keep asking the basic questions, people have answers. People do have some opinion. Now, it may not be completely clear, but you start with that. And this actually happened with a fellow. I'm here in Toronto, and there was a fellow who did some work here and did a kind of communication work. And we hit a point where we were struggling around the niche. And then finally I said to him, "Oh, you know what's happening is we've actually just tapped out. The well is dry. There actually isn't any more clarity to have, because you need to have more experiences.
Hmm.
We've sort of reflected as much as it's possible to reflect, and then we keep going back to the same memories to pull new things from, but there's nothing else to pull. You need to go create more memories. You need to go out and experiment more, work with different people, take what you've got, and then you work with more and more of those people, and then you start to see the finer details, because you say, okay, well, I've got it clear. So you write out a sales letter for those people, but then you start to see, oh, there's people who come who were clearly attracted to this, who are not your people. So you look at it and say, wait, well, how did they slip through? And then you add another layer. You add another sentence or two, or you take this out because it seemed to.
Hmm.
So there's an inner and an outer kind of movement with niching where uh, you try things and then you reflect on them. You do a little experiment and then you think about it. And the more willing you are to make a dramatic test, the faster you'll learn. If you're willing to just say, well, I think maybe I want to go in this direction, great. And they try it's a beta test, but they try it very clearly in that direction. They're not tepid about it. They really go for that niche, and then they reflect on it and they say, did that work or not? Did it feel good or not? Am I inspired by these people? Um, would I want to? And one of my favorite questions is, what would you want to be known for? So I ask people to imagine this. I say, imagine you're at a party and you're sitting down like I am on a couch, but right behind you, there's a couple of people talking about you. And one of them says, hey, what does Tad do? And your ears perk up. They're talking about you. Now, the ethical thing would be to turn around, let them know that you're there so that you don't overhear anything. But of course you don't.
Good to add that footnote.
Yeah, you don't at all. If you just kind of get real still, because now, and you're listening. Now you really want to hear what they're saying. And one of them says, "Yeah, so what does Tad do?" And the other one says something. And so then the question I'll ask people is, what is it that they could say that you would hate? You'd say, "No, oh God, am I known for that? Oh God, you just want to throw in the towel and leave the party and never come back." But there might also be something they could say that you would light up. Like, yes, that's the thing. That's to me the most, I don't know, located, tangible, concrete way to think about niching, because that's where it will show up.
Hmm.
Is two people talking at a party. People are talking about us from time to time. It happens. But what do they say? And
Hmm.
so, yeah, what would you not want them to say? What would you want them to say? And then if once you're clear what you want them to say, then everything has to be built around crafting that,
Mhm.
that reputation, doing the things that would actually have them say that. Uh, Yeah. So, I mean, gosh, there's so much to say about
And
niching. But yeah.
and I think, like, I'll just add to what you're saying, at least in my experience, this is a never-ending process. It's not like you do it, you're gonna spend your month doing this, and then
Right.
you're done. It's a constantly ongoing, emergent, evolving process that is very much alive.
It will always change. There's two reasons it'll always change. One is you will change. Your
Mm,
interests, I mean, think about who you were 10 years ago, who your friends were, where you lived, what you did for work 10 years ago. It may bear very little resemblance to where you are now. So you will change, but also the marketplace will change. I mean, let's just look at the last few years of all the lockdowns. I saw a lot of body workers become life coaches all of a sudden because they had to move online. They had to figure out a way to make money that wasn't physically touching people.
Mm.
So there are sometimes these huge sea changes, these massive page turners in the, what happened to blockbuster movies? They're gone because
Mhm.
the whole industry, the technology changed. So they will change. And there are periods of relative stability where you're not changing that much. Thank God, because that's exhausting. And the marketplace isn't changing that much. And during those times, the key is just enjoy, ride that out, enjoy it for as long as it'll last, because it will at some point change. Or, you're a yoga teacher in a small town and everything's great. But then you look up 5 years later and suddenly you realize, wait, you were the only yoga teacher 5 years ago and now there's 20. So this will probably necessitate that you have to change. You can't be the generalist yoga teacher anymore. But that's not all bad, because you may say, oh, thank God, I can let go of those morning classes, or I can stop doing the prenatal yoga. I didn't like it anyways, or I can, and you get to focus and you get to really do the thing that you're most excited to do and leave the other stuff to other people. In fact, refer out, and then you get a whole ecosystem that's really rich. And ideally, then it's everybody referring to everybody, people doing the kind of stuff that they like to do. And possibly it could get to a point where it's just oversaturated. There are too many yoga teachers. So then you're not going to be able to make it as a yoga teacher. So then you got to adapt and maybe add something else, figure out another source of income. So it's, yeah, what you're saying is very true. It never ends. It just rests once in a while. It
Mm.
just pauses once in a while. It gives you a break, and thank God. But that's not forever when it happens.
Mhm. So I want to jump like super into the weeds here for a minute.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on launching?
It's exhausting. That's the first thing that people should know. If you're
And
going
it
to do
just maybe we just clarify for maybe not everyone knows what launching means. Can you just say a few words about that?
yeah, launching mean you got something you want to offer the world. You got a new program, or you got a package, product or something, and you want to put it out into the world, but you want to do it in such a way that it's going to make a splash. You're going to open a restaurant, and you want to do it in such a way that you get some media for it. You get a lot of people there on that first night, or the first weekend. It's packed to the gills, so that everybody runs off and tells everybody else, "Oh, what a great restaurant!" And you get the buzz that will then carry. And it's trying to get a big impact in a small period of time in a launch, like a launch of a rocket ship. It just takes so much effort. I mean, it's amazing. You get to go into space, but that launch takes a lot of fuel to just get out of the inertia. And so different than just sending out an email or two. This is like a rocket launch. There's a big checklist of things to do. So yeah, it's exhausting. That's the first thing to know. The people sometimes don't realize how much work it'll be, and later they wish they had known. Because I've seen colleagues just crater, absolutely just burned out after a launch, and like, I won't do a launch for years. So the first thing is you've got to start planning it at least a year in advance if you really want to do this well. You think, okay, I'm going to relaunch. Ideally, you do it a year in advance. Then you map it out. You create a plan. That's the biggest thing with a launch. You need to have a plan, and that plan needs to be crafted as far in advance as possible. I mean, at least 3 months, let's say.
Hmm.
You craft the plan, and then even if there's going to be emails to go with it, you write those emails at the beginning, not on the day of. And then you just, because if you do that, what happens is every day maybe you have one or two things to do, and it's spread out, so you can kind of saunter your way towards the finish line. Because otherwise, what happens, and we've all seen it, and we've all probably done it, is it's 3 weeks before the event, nobody's signed up, and now it's a mad scramble and panicking, and you're sending emails to your colleagues, hey, could you share this up? And they don't even see it until 2 weeks out. And that's the other reason to plan it, is if you're going to be asking other people to help, you've got to give them as much notice as possible. I mean, ideally, you often reach out to these people a year before, 6 months before, saying, hey, we've got this launch. Could you put it in your calendar? Could you help?
Mm.
Because people who are I suppose, more successful in their business, they get more people asking them, and their promotional calendars get full at a certain point. They may not be able to do much to help you if you ask them 3 weeks before. So yeah, if you're going to launch, think it through, really map it out, um, so that you just have to do one or two things a day.
Hmm. Yeah, and just a note on what you said about people who who you might be approaching. Some people have a very particular rhythm and cycle for their newsletters or their posting. Especially if it's like a big organization, and so you really want to get into their pipeline,
Yes.
on their schedule, not on your schedule. I will add a little, like a maybe a slightly contradictory note here, but just a footnote to kind of how people work. So the whole thing about like creating all your content in advance, like, and I've
Mm.
done that a few times, and I honestly, I found it exhausting, and this time around where
Mm.
we're running a big crowdfunding campaign, and what I found is that there's a certain naturalness for me, and this is just for me, to kind of
Mm.
write the emails in the process of the campaign, in the
Uh-huh.
process of the thing that helps me, because there's also something, this kind of speaks to like the livingness of something, like when you put something out as a communication, it has
Mm.
a life to it. And I always find there's a difference between if I kind of take something I wrote in the past and kind of tweak it a little bit, or if I write it fresh in the moment as an expression of kind of like what's present. It's not
Mm.
for everybody, but I've actually found that under certain circumstances that there's a certain a deeper authenticity, and somehow for me a more ease of content creation
I
in
yeah,
in the moment.
I hear you. The sort of tweak I'd give on this, or from my experiences, if you have a launch, there's probably going to be certain things you do throughout the launch. It's not
Hmm.
just, hey, buy my stuff, but you're doing launch events. So you're doing interviews with people, you're doing a special class that you're teaching, or whatever it is. But there may be a series of events, sort of turning the launch into a bit of a celebration or a festival, and giving a lot of stuff away, and building the hype about it. And so let's say you've got 5 things that you're doing in the lead up to the launch. Then there are going to be certain basics that you could include in an email if you're going to write an email about each of those. And in my experience, I would write the basics there, and when the day came, I would go and I would edit it.
Mm.
But I didn't
Hmm.
have to write all of it that day. Most of
Hmm.
it could be written in advance. Then on the day, I'd sit and it's like, okay, yeah, what's been happening in the launch? What can I change in those first few paragraphs? Or, um, but what'll happen in when there's no plan at all, it's people say, "Oh, I should do some free things leading up to it," but then they even try to scramble those together in the last minute. And that stuff should be thought through months before. That should
Yeah,
be
for
lined up
sure.
months before, and then when you get there, it's just a matter of how do you word it and
Hmm.
talk about it. But, if I was doing a series of interviews, I could get the person I'm interviewing's photo, their bio in the email. I could include some of the story about how I met them. I could probably write that up. I could, put the links to their whatever. That stuff can all be done in advance, and then the polishing and the bringing it into the present moment could be done the night before, when I send the email. It's just that this, how do we prepare ourselves? Because otherwise, people unduly burden themselves
Hmm.
in that last crunch time, and that really destroys people. And or it doesn't destroy them, and their launch is really terrible because they don't do much in the launch because they couldn't bear it. Which then it just turns into a pitch fest, and hey, everybody buy from me, versus a kind of this festival of generosity of you giving to
Mm.
your people.
Yeah. The planning is key, and I also totally agree that sometimes when I'm in the thick of it and I have a collection of pre-created resources, I'm always grateful that they're there. I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't have to do this from scratch right now. So maybe just as we wind down the conversation here, speaking of like creating content, um, what what are your thoughts on just creating good content? I mean, you've created a huge like
Right.
library of videos and different things that you put out there. Like, how do you approach that process?
This is the best advice I've ever come up with on it, is every day, and schedule this into your calendar if this is something you struggle with. every day, just schedule some point. You just sit down for 5 minutes. And this is really all it takes. At most, it may not even take the full 5. And you just think, okay, what's happened in the last 24 hours that would be a good story that I could share? That would be a good example that I could share in terms of the work that I do. So I might think, oh, I went to this butcher shop and something happened there. That would be a great story I could share. That content is the best because in sharing the story, your point of view will also start to appear, even obliquely, even if it's not overt. And almost every day there's some story, something, or you talk with a client, you get off the phone with one of your clients and you say, oh man, I said something so smart. I've never said that before. Or they said something so interesting, or wow, the way we did that exercise, and what a great story to share. So if every day you're just reflecting on stories, I think you're going to do fine.
That's beautiful advice, and it also makes you more present. I feel like the biggest value that you can offer people is to somehow like weave your presence of life into whatever it is you're offering for them to discover something for themselves.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I just the stories and the case studies are more powerful than the
Hmm.
ideas because people are just so sick of bullshit philosophies. They want to, does this work? That's what they want to
Mm.
know.
Hmm.
Does this
Hmm.
actually produce results? And it's, of course, stories are so helpful because it takes it out of the abstract and it helps ground it into somebody's real life. And so they can say, now I see how that theory works. So the more stories you can share, the better. And if you even want to start off, you can just start by saying, let me reflect over my last 5 or 10 years and the clients that I've worked with. And just, are there any stories that come to mind? That, the
Hmm.
ones I often tell, or I remember, I think about that person, what happened. And then you can be sharing those stories. Of course, you make them anonymous and you take out any incriminating details. And if you need to, you check with those people first. But there's so many stories we have. Or what about when you were learning and your own healing process? You can share stories about that. So there are just so many that we can share. When I do my one-on-one puttering sessions, in the sales letter for it, I say, just so you know, I'll probably turn this into a video. Like I don't have any commitment to confidentiality. I'm not going to say your name. I'm not going to. People won't know who you are, but I will be sharing these stories. Because this stuff is too good
Hmm.
to keep back. And so I wish I did more of them, but that's the easiest. If you just, because you can start thinking about memes and videos, but also I find if I turn on a camera and I say, hey, all right, 60 seconds convincing me to buy from you, everybody freezes up, nobody wants to do it.
I
But if
call
I
it turning into a robot.
Yeah. And if I turn the camera on you and I said, hey, tell me about the ideas that you're most passionate about that drive your business, people are a lot more comfortable. But if I turn the
Mm.
camera on you and I say, could you just tell me a story of a client you worked with? They'll struggle for a minute and then oh yeah, and then they'll tell a story and all of a sudden they're so natural about it.
Mm.
So it comes across better when people start telling stories,
Hmm.
that they lose the self-consciousness that comes from self-promotion, and the maybe, is my idea good enough, in the second one. So stories are where it's at.
Stories are definitely where it's at. Tad, thank you so much for the conversation, for the time, for sharing your wisdom. Really appreciate the work that you do, the energy you bring to it. As we started, at the beginning, there aren't, at least from my experience, there aren't too many alternative perspectives on marketing, and if there are, they're drowned out by the vast mainstream kind of approach to it. So I really appreciate everything you share, and just inviting this quality of deep humanity into the way that we sell.
Oh, well, bless you. It's real good to be with you this morning, and good luck on all that you're up to right now.
Thanks, man.